Welcome, welcome. You are listening to a 2019 Write On Con podcast. My name is Jade, and I'm absolutely thrilled to chat today with author Mikela Prevost, all about author and illustrator life. Thank you ever so much for joining me, Mikela.
Thank you so much for having me.
For those of you who may not know, Mikela is an illustrator and an author whose debut picture book, Let's Have a Dog Party, comes out in March this year, and it looks absolutely adorable. I love the illustrations on it already. Can we start by asking what first drew you into becoming an author slash illustrator?
Yeah, I would just have to say, growing up, I wasn't really good at reading. I don't know if it was just my folks didn't work so much with me with reading, but so I was always drawn to just the drawings in picture books and just anything visual. And once I became more adept at reading, I got really into Shel Silverstein, and I don't know how worldwide he is, but here in the States, he was just like, that was the book that you would pass around with, like Where the Sidewalk Ends and Light in the Attic and all of just his collection of poems. So I just loved his short little poems and how usually just silly and just subversive they were, and how there could be and one at a given time you could turn the page and there'd be like a guy with his naked bum hanging out, and how that was so great to see as a as a kid growing up and feeling like hee we're getting away with something in third grade. um, so after Shel Silverstein pretty much just indoctrinated me with his poetry and his illustrations, I was hooked, and I just thought, I've got to do this. I've got to make books like this. I've got to make either poems or just do his drawings. And yeah, I'd say I pretty much hooked with him. And then from there on, it was just kind of even more comics like Calvin and Hobbes. And anyway, I could just get like visual media, like I could gobble it up without actually having to like go to anything that required money. So lots of newspapers, lots of free comics. So yeah, that's kind of where I started out.
Yeah, I remember Calvin and Hobbes actually when I was young as well.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
God. I loved how, again, just like he showed, Bill Watterson could show you could be just a bad kid. There were so many books where it's just like, this is how you act. This is how you need to be good. And with Calvin, he's throwing a fit. He's like hammering nails into coffee tables, blaming everything on Hobbes. And I just loved it. I was like, how truthful it was and how it felt like, oh, I kind of do this too. Oh.
So what came first for you? Was it the writing side of it, or was it the illustration side?
It was always the drawing, the illustrating side. I just, again, I always could draw. That was something I could, impress like the popular kids in my school with. Is I was just no good at anything academic, but hey, if I could draw you a dinosaur, will you be my friend, kind of thing. So I got really into drawing. It's the only way I could get teachers to kind of pay attention to me, I felt, because I was easy for me to fly under the radar being a really quiet kid. And so once I just started drawing and drawing and drawing and learning to do a lot of things that I think they teach you now to not do, like tracing, like don't trace, that's cheating. I'm like, oh no, tracing is how you learn. That's how you learn to draw. So do you do everything you can to cheat? And that eventually just builds on itself. So yeah, again, Calvin and Hobbes traced a lot of that, traced and drew a lot of really bad heavy metal band covers to impress the boys, Motley Crue and things like that. So, but yeah, that just kind of snowballed into, once I drew, I was like, well, I have all these story ideas in my head though. But I didn't have um, just the feeling of the confidence of being able to write, because I was never formally trained as a writer, which I feel like maybe a lot of writers have like up on me, as just that confidence. And I think you just have to help, nurture that and grow that, even though I knew I could always fall back on my illustration. So yeah, illustrating came first.
And then it was sort of writing after that, and did you actually look at how to do the writing side of it,
Yes.
or?
Oh, yeah. Again, it's like, and I think, every creative person has that feeling of just being a hack. I'm a fraud, I'm a fake, I don't know what I'm doing. So just going to the library constantly and, coming out with armfuls of just picture books and just gobbling up everything I could, just consuming the written word as much as possible and doing it in that picture book form, which is so different than, growing up when it was so much longer and Cat in the Hat. And now it's like really trying to stay in that really sweet spot of like 300 to 500 words, so really short, and just learning what publishing is now. So trying to stay with really current with the trends today and just try to look for books that are being published now, but still like having that soft spot in my heart for the older books and why I love them, and just seeing what can I extract from that now, but yet do it in today's market.
Yeah, that's actually something that maybe concerns people who also want to get into the same industry. For instance, do they need to follow trends? How does an author or an illustrator become one or the other and still maintain a freshness?
Yeah, I think, well, trying to get into it now, again, it was so much easier for me to fall back on illustration. And I think because I had that passion from the very beginning, from being young, I could really feel confident in that and know that eventually my writing would follow suit, and I still feel young in my writing. And hopefully with time, it'll feel more confident, and I will really, maybe at some point, I'd love to just write something and have someone else illustrate it to see what comes out of their mind and their illustration, their head. But for now, though, it's all about reading what's current, reading within things that have been published within the last 5 years. And I think that's the real like secret sauce right now. Like what's happening now? What are kids reading now? And also what new thing can we bring to the table? Even though this media form is kind of changing over the last, 10, 20 years. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have always had a passion for drawing, but I'm a writer first. So if there are people like me out there who say, actually, I'm pretty good at kind of both, how would an author then integrate their illustration side of it?
Right. I think that, again, just going back to what's happening now and what we're seeing now with picture books, if you feel strong in your writing but you might not feel as confident in your illustration, I think we've got to look at how the text and the illustrations integrate together and how they work synonymously with each other. I see a lot of young artists not really seeing the design end of it. They might see like, oh, I really like drawing dragons, so I'm just going to fill every page with dragons. And it's like, no, well, where do the words go? Like, give room for breathing room. And I mean, in design, you call that negative space. So it's like just looking at more of the design of the picture book and then focusing on that, and then kind of working your illustrations around that in sequence with the text and how you've got everything paced out as a picture book. Because again, picture books now, they're very sparse. So, but you also want to leave room in your illustrations for text and also just for the child's own imagination. I mean, I'm of the thought at this point in my career, like less is more. And I don't like overwhelming my readers with a lot of just visual stimuli. I want them to feel like they can follow it and feel confident and grow as a reader themselves. And if I just clutter it up with all the little goody things that I want to draw, it's just going to be almost too much. And I want them to feel like my books are approachable and it's something that they can run off with and, read under their bed and giggle at, and not feel like it's just too overwhelming and it's too much for them. So, but yeah, starting out, if you're a writer and you have a passion for illustration, I mean, that is so great. And again, I think it helps to be both and this is only in my point of view, in my case, it just really helps to streamline the process. You don't have to send off your manuscript and, pray and hope and do some kind of dance to make sure that everything gets the way you want it to be with the on the illustration side. I mean, once you're able to do both, you are your own boss and you make the call. And yeah, being just a both writer and illustrator, if you're able to do both, it's just you get to do what you want to do. It's your book.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of already answered my next question, but one thing that was submitted in a little group was when you are both writing and illustrating the story, what would you or what should you really think about first? The illustrations and how you're going to present the text, or the text itself? But I think from hearing, you speak before, it's kind of placement is very necessary to think about. So possibly design.
Yes, design. One thing I would recommend people do, and I mean, I do this, all my illustration friends do this, is you do a very rough little dummy, a really, really rough, and make it small and almost like just stick figures. And I think that's approachable to anybody. Is just a person's here, a person's there, make like a block for a couch, or just keep it really, really simplified. And then you'll see the flow of it as you turn the pages. Maybe some things get a little stagnant and go, oh, I've had the same character in the same spot for the last 3 spreads. I need to move things around. So really, again, that design aspect is very heavy, and just simplifying it, making it easy on yourself, and not committing to doing these just really intense drawings from the very beginning, which might get cut eventually by your art director. Just simplify it for yourself so it's something that you can grasp once you look at it as a whole. Will really help you in the long run. So I'm trying to think. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah, that's great. That's everything that you're saying is very valuable. And, you know, for me, who's kind of foreign to the author illustrator lifestyle and how things work, it's really good to see from your expertise as to how you need to think about the story as it is. I mean, how might one go about finding their style for both roles in particular? For instance, if your art or illustrations tend to be darker in tone than your prose is, how
Mhm.
can you kind of align them together to be complementary of each other?
That's a great question. And I think I'm curious to see how just writers approach this subject, because I find as writer illustrator and just life in general, sometimes you're going to have to make sacrifices and that you don't want to do. And number one, I mean, as a writer for picture books and also doing the illustration, you're serving the story first. So I, as the illustrator, even though that's kind of my strength, I need to take a back seat. And if I've got a story idea in my head and I know it's going to work, the rhythm of it's working, I know it'll be enjoyable, but then the illustrator on my shoulder's like, but I don't want to draw that. That's boring. I just got to shush that little voice and be like, you got to do it, and that's how I had to approach a lot of illustration early on, just doing editorial work or a couple other picture books I did. There was just things you're like, you just got to do it. This is what's needed in the story, and this has to serve the story, and you've got to really punch this up and make it fun for the reader. And it's not about serving your own needs as an artist. You've got to serve the reader. So you've got to find balance, as a writer. You're serving the story, and if you need to write something that's just going to help move the story along in a way that's going to help the reader enjoy this ride, the illustrator, again, has to kind of follow suit and make it dynamic too, to keep the reader engaged. So just
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah. I remember that you mentioned earlier, actually, you can be sort of your own boss, so you don't have to rely on anybody if you are an author slash illustrator. But how does being both affect the application or the publication process? Are there more complications? Are there more hoops to jump through?
Um, Unfortunately, it is way easier. And so
That's good to know.
okay, good, good. I know I have some writer friends who just, I feel like they stare daggers at the back of my head because they're like, I can't draw. And I'm like, well, let's teach a class. Like, to an art class. It just makes it so much easier. Just because I get to work with both the editor and art director like synonymously. And that is so great because I can talk craft with the editor. Like, we need to work on this text here. We need this, we've got to change this hook. And I'm like, okay, okay, okay. But then and then the next call, I talked to the art director. She's like, oh no, this image is falling right in the gutter. Oh shoot, this is gonna mess up on the bleed. So we got to drop this character down so I can really talk shop with her. Um, it just helps. And again, you just have ultimate control, and there's no surprises. And that's, I think, what's going to be really interesting once I start doing more just illustrating again, just on my own, like having the notes back from the author saying, oh, I want to, this character I'm not really liking their representation or whatever. So it'll be a little different. So again, it is just so much easier being both, and they love working with just one, I think.
Yeah, from their standpoint, I'm sure it's a lot easier.
Yes, yes.
Because then they only maybe have to have one ego to sort of deal with.
Gosh, exactly. Oh, God bless them, like art directors and editors, I can't imagine. And I mean, of course, everyone in writing is lovely. They're all beautiful people. So there's no egos to have to deal with, I imagine. But no, it is a lot easier. And I know they just half as many emails.
That is also true. Do you have any advice for authors or illustrators looking to approach the picture book market or the author-illustrator market traditionally?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I would, first of all, you just got to get plugged in, just know what this industry is about. I mean, like, right on con, this is perfect. You're getting your foot in the door and just being exposed to what this industry is, what this business is. It's not a hobby, and if you're going to approach it as a hobby, lovely, wonderful, perfect, write books for your kids or your grandkids or whoever you want. But if you really want to make this your passion in your career, you've got to dive into the deep end and really take this seriously, So again, like right on con, SCBWI, joining that, just going to conferences, doing things within your region. I mean, trying to get together and have critique groups, and being honest. You need honesty from the people in your critique group, because hopefully you're going to get something published, and unfortunately you're going to get real honesty that way when the reviews come in, and you want to be able to get that first and foremost from your critique group. And of course through your publisher and your editor will be saying things along the way, but you got to like toughen up that skin and know that this is going to be something that people read, that you have no control how they read it and how they perceive it. So toughen up that skin from the beginning. So, and again, like conferences, conventions, all help with that. Being active online, just getting your work out, getting it exposed, either if you participate in all different kinds of writing, workshops or things that they had, like the challenges that they have monthly or yearly. Just being really active and showing that you're active, I think, is definitely a big, big plus.
Yeah, I mean, in your experience, which role is established sooner? Is it being the author or the illustrator in those circles?
I think for me, it really helped being active with my illustration. I was just doing a lot of stuff online as far as just like Instagram and putting things up on Twitter, and I'd have again like a few picture books that I had illustrated, but I kind of changed my style, and I was trying to just revamp my whole look. And once I started really just buckling down and working on this new style that I have now, really just being active and posting and trying to join challenges on Instagram and just fueling my own fire. And that's how that actually led me to having the confidence to attend like SCBWI conferences in LA and New York, and having a portfolio to bring, and people could see, even though I might not have the text, I might not have the story, like the ideas were there that could spark a story. And I think that's a great thing. Again, I'm speaking to you illustrators out there, trying to get into the writing. If you just have an image that really captivates the viewer and thinks and asks the question, what is this about? What is this? Is this a story? Because I am dying to know. I have so many questions. You want to, and again, even if you're a writer, like writing just tiny little snippets of stories or just like a little synopsis, like on Twitter when they have the pitch wars, you have those, try to keep a really short little tweet about what your story is about that's going to spark interest. I mean, just doing that as a challenge for yourself and trying to push those out, it's gonna attract attention, and what you're passionate about will attract others that are passionate about exposing your work to the world.
Yeah, passion is definitely, I think, a prime motivator, and people will always be able to see what you're passionate about.
Oh, totally. Exactly. Yes.
If you're enthused, other people will be enthused.
Oh my gosh. Then that's, I think, number one. If you're passionate about writing and you just can't stop doing it, it will come and it will be seen and it will attract attention. Illustration, same thing. Like there's definitely been projects that, I mean, I had absolutely no passion on doing, but it was good to help pay the bills. So I did it. And those are the things you do not see in my portfolio because they are just feel flat and passionless, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, maybe omit the things that don't reflect you as where you're going next.
Exactly. Yes, that is such a great point. I mean, if you're trying to build up your portfolio either visually or with your writing, don't include what you are not passionate about. If you are not passionate about writing about fairy tales, then but you got a great little gig or something happened where you had to write that, don't include that because guess what? You're going to get a job about writing about fairy tales.
Yeah.
Like, no doubt.
Which will suck your energy even more.
Oh, exactly. Totally.
So, for those who may not be looking to go traditional route, is it possible to be a successful independent published author slash illustrator, especially in today's climate where it isn't necessarily a free for all, but there's a lot of people who want to be out there and be seen?
Um, I would say you need to have in an incredible amount of hustle if
Mm.
you are independently published. I have 2 friends who have independently published several of their books, and their books are beautiful. I love them. And for whatever reason, they wanted to go more of the independent route, and more power to them. And thankfully, though, they have an incredible amount of hustle. I I wow. I mean, it's insane. But I think they knew that going into it once they self-published, that in order to make this work, they were going to have to really put boots to the ground and get out there and push and get their books exposed as much as possible. So if you have that drive and you have that passion and you love networking in that way, and I would also say extremely extroverted, then go for it. If you like sitting in a quiet little room and just emailing people every once in a while, maybe not self-publish because
Yeah.
that's more my liking.
That second one is mostly me.
I know. I'm like, oh, when they drop off something for like Amazon, I'm like, oh, there's someone at the door. Oh my gosh.
Hiding underneath the sofa or something.
I'm hiding. Yes, are they like asking the dogs, are they gone?
Oh, well, speaking of your friends who are also author illustrators, who are some of the author illustrators that you love and whose work maybe inspired you in some way?
Well, I'd have to definitely mention 3 of my friends that I would say pushed me, like my heels dragging on the ground out of just, again, fear of rejection, that pushed me into just really getting serious about publication and trying to find an agent, which I think number is very key in today's climate, just to have an advocate for you. But my three friends, Juana Martinez Neal, and author-illustrator, and Molly Idol, and author-illustrator, and another friend, Laura Jacobson, who's primarily an illustrator and now does contemporary art, contemporary painting. It's gorgeous. But I think having people that inspire me that way, just with their work, and also just inspire me how, again, they have that drive, and they have the confidence and the encouragement in you to know, like, no, I'm not going to let you sit in your little room and do your doodles and just hope through just sending up little hope prayers or whatever up into the universe that something's going to happen. It's like like really getting out there and pushing yourself. So those three I definitely wanted to mention. But as far as who I would have in my arms through that boatload of books I'd pick up from the library, I love just picture books that are really, again, like that Shel Silverstein kind of quality, just kind of subversive and kind of out of left field. And one of them's John Agee. He wrote My Rhinoceros, and I recommend everyone reading that book. An atypical pet book, and it just makes me laugh thinking about it. And his illustrations are so different than my style. They're just very simple, very just kind of not plain, but just very stylistically just simple, but it adds to the story. And I think he's a great one to look at if you're thinking about trying to dip your toe into illustration. It doesn't have to be elaborate and crazy and like Chris Van Allsburg, level of detail. It can be just a really simple, subtle style, but it's so effective to the story. And yeah, so I love him. And then another one who's coming out, she's got several books coming out. Oh, I can't wait. Her name's Andrea Sarumi. She just did a book called Accident, and I recommend anybody, again, that's more heavily on the illustration side, but someone I saw on Twitter called it a cross between Richard Scarry, the Busy People book, and a slash with BoJack Horseman, the TV show. So just
Wow.
really weird, just animals like washing windows with Windex and just silly. I mean, you could stare at it all day. That's the one I take under the covers with me at night, and I just look at and giggle at all night because her just so funny, so funny.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you mentioned as well earlier on, obviously maybe some kind of the sort of what they call pop culture may
Yeah.
influence trends and stuff like that. But I was interested to know how you have seen picture books or author illustrators, how that has evolved in the last, say, 5 years.
I would say the last 5 years, definitely the text has gotten a lot shorter. I mean, it was at I'd say 5 years ago or so, text was a little bit more not complicated, but a little longer in length. Illustrations even were a bit more detailed. Again, coming more from that old school of David Wiesner, Chris Van Allsburg, where it was just very heavily detailed. And I really feel like the industry is trying to embrace like a more simplistic style. I mean, my style is very much like, I would say, not maybe childlike, but because I love children's art. I love the messiness of it. I love how it's not perfect, and I like how it feels approachable. A kid could look at that and be like, I think I could draw that. And I'm like, good, go do it. Go try. Go copy it. So I feel like the industry's just getting, again, more open-minded and trying also just to stay current with what's happening just in the world, just, compassion and tolerance. I love seeing that. I love seeing that so much more of the stories now are about just being accepted, and I accept you at first glance. Like there's no prerequisite of like if you are a good human being or not. Like you are a child, so you are worthy, and you are worthy of reading. And I love that. So I definitely see that happening. And I think it's only going to go up, as we're becoming more aware of just what we need to be showing and exhibiting to our kids, to the future.
Yep, I think that's really important because, obviously picture books may be the first things they ever read or read.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's
Exactly.
really important.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, are there any sources you recommend for aspiring author illustrators? Are there any websites and books? I know you mentioned conferences and Write on Con, but just wondered if there are any resources that helped you.
Yeah, I would really recommend. There are a lot of books out there that talk about the craft of picture books. I feel like, I don't know, at this point now, with how the market's evolving and changing, I feel like some of them are getting a little more out of date with how the picture book is structured. So I can't truly speak of any kind of literature at the moment that would be the most helpful for picture book writing. I would, again, just say, go to the library, read everything. And what also I would do is like transcribe it. I mean, I picked up, again, My Rhinoceros, John Agee. It's like 267 words. I wrote down everything, typed it all up, looked at it, looked at the pacing, and I was like, oh, I get it. I see what's happening here. Oh, okay. So going through and just using those as your mentor texts would really help, just at the writing side. For the illustration side, one book I love so much. It's by Molly Bang, Bang, and I think it's called, it might be Little Red Riding Hood. I always forget the title, but it's basically, she breaks down the story of Little Red Riding Hood into the most simple primary shapes. And she talks about it's again design. Like, let's take Little Red Riding Hood, represent her as a triangle, little red triangle. Let's have trees. Those are long rectangles, and let's put them in a forest. The wolf is just two triangles tipped on their sides to look like a mouth. And she goes through the process of taking different images from Little Red Riding Hood and showing how you can design that and how it just impacts the reader, where we place Little Red in relation to the wolf, how we can make the wolf scarier, how the wolf can look goofy by putting the triangle of his eye somewhere else placed on his face. It's, again, just design and placement. I think that is just essential and key. Just learning just the design and how the pages change with each page turn, how they evolve. So yeah, Molly Bang's Little Red Riding Hood book. Sorry, wish I knew the name.
We can look it up. Don't worry. Absolutely, we can find out what that is. But as unfortunately we are out of time, I really have enjoyed listening to you and getting all this information about you. I feel like it just goes to show that if you are passionate, if you are enthusiastic about what you want to do, your style will grow from that. And I think that's something that everybody would, whether they illustrate or not, would actually resonate a lot with. So again, thank you so much for joining me. And where can our listeners find you online?
Wonderful. I'm at Mikela Prevost, MikelaPrevost.com. I'm on Twitter at Mikela Prevost, Instagram at Mikela Prevost. I'm not very creative with my names, so it's all just my name, and I'm all over all those.
Well, I'm definitely going to follow you on Instagram because I want to see more of those.
Oh, wonderful. Yay.
Definitely. But thank you again ever so much for joining us. And to all of you listening at Write on Con 2019, thank you so much for listening in. If you'd like to take part in the discussion, we'd love for you to do so. The comments are available at the bottom of the podcast page. But thank you very much again for joining us, Mikela. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And for everyone else, happy writing.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.